One of the conferences that is the least talked about but usually has some pretty good talent is the MAC. Every year there's always a MAC team that comes out of nowhere and is near the top of college football, and they also typically have a pretty good quarterback as well. In today's video, I want to continue my series taking a look at the starting quarterbacks for each and every conference, and today we're going to focus on the MAC. We're going to go through the starters for each and every MAC school. I'm going to introduce you to who they are, and I'm also going to talk about how I think they're going to do this year. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about all the starting quarterbacks for the MAC in 2025. Okay, so first and foremost, I want to give a big shout out to The Athletic, as they ended up making a list of all the starting quarterbacks in college football, and this one definitely helped me out a lot. We're to start with the team that's probably going to be the worst, and that is the Kent State Golden Flashes. Their starting quarterback is most likely going to be Devin Cargman, and nobody really knows about this guy. Cargman was the number 55 quarterback in the class of 2022 and the number 866 player from Eastside High School in New Jersey. Cargman threw for nearly 8,000 yards and 77 touchdowns during his high school career, and so far at Kent State has played a little bit each season. In total, he's had about 1,200 yards with 8 touchdowns, but he also had a terrible injury, which resulted in him being carted off the field against Penn State. This was super heartbreaking, but he will be back as a starter in 2025, and hopefully he can have a good season. Up next, we're going to talk about the new quarterback for the Ball State Cardinals, as they lost Caden Simonza over to Tulane, and Kyle Kelly is the new starter. He ended up going to Gaither High School, which was located in Tampa, Florida, and he was the number 61 quarterback in the class of 2021 and the number 915 player overall. Kelly's obviously been good for a couple of years now, as going back to his high school career, he had more than 5,000 passing yards and 60 touchdowns, and 81 combined touchdowns. Kelly has been at Ball State for a couple of years now, and in his first 3 seasons in Muncie, he's totaled just over 600 yards and 2 touchdowns, with 3 interceptions. He was a really good rusher though, as he had 724 yards and 7 scores in 2023, and will return as one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the MAC, but he still has a lot to prove, and we'll see how he does. The next school we're to talk about is the Western Michigan Broncos, and their new starting quarterback will be Brock Lowry. He's a guy who started out at a Power 4 program that is now at the Group of 5. As coming out of Canfield High School in Ohio, Brock Lowry was the number 54 quarterback in the class of 2023 and originally decided to commit to the Indiana Hoosiers. He ended up having nearly 5,000 yards and 40 touchdown passes in high school, but he ended up completing 1 pass for 8 yards with the Hoosiers. He would follow Walt Bell to Western Michigan in 2024, where he completed 4 passes. Lowry is one of the bigger unknowns in the MAC this year, but at one point he was a Power 4 level quarterback, so hopefully he'll be pretty good this season. The fourth quarterback we're going to talk about is new Northern Illinois starter Josh Holst. He ended up going to Marengo High School, which was located in Illinois, and he had 38 total touchdowns back in 2022. He doesn't have a 24/7 sports profile, so I assume he was probably a walk-on, and so far at Northern Illinois, he has played a little bit. In 2024, he threw for nearly 600 yards with 2 touchdowns and 2 picks, and again, he's not very experienced, but has a lot of potential for the Huskies. Our second Power 4 to Group of 5 transfer is Joey Labus. Coming out of Brecksville High School in Ohio, Joey Labus was actually a 4-star recruit. According to 24/7 Sports, he was the number 28 quarterback in the class of 2021, and he was definitely a blue chip. I mean, going back in time, Labus ended up putting up good numbers while he was in high school, as he threw for nearly 8,000 yards and 61 touchdowns in just 3 years. Unfortunately, at Iowa, he was never able to see the field, as he went 14 of 24 for 139 yards and a touchdown. He would transfer to Central Michigan, where in 2024 he would get on the field. He threw for just over 1,100 yards with 7 touchdowns and 7 picks. Obviously, he needs to cut down on the turnovers, but honestly, he's one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the MAC this year, and I think has a very high ceiling for them. At this point, we might as well keep them coming, as we have another Power 4 to Group of 5 player in Noah Kim. He should be the new starter for the Eastern Michigan Eagles, and Kim's had quite the interesting career. According to 24/7 Sports, he was the number 44 pro-style quarterback in the class of 2020, and that came after a good career at Westfield High School, in which he had 6,700 yards and 110 touchdowns in the state of Virginia. Kim would end up playing a couple of years at Michigan State, and he was actually the starter in 2023, and he threw for 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns before he was eventually benched. he would decide to transfer to Coastal Carolina, where he was unable to win the starting job, but still managed to pass for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. Coastal is moving in a new direction, and Kim transfers to Eastern Michigan as a guy who has a decent amount of experience and could be pretty solid. For our next guy, I've actually done a full-length feature on him, and it is Daquan Roberson. He's one of those guys who has unfortunately abused the portal, but going back in time, he went to DePaul Catholic High School and ended up becoming the number 8 dual-threat quarterback in the class of 2019. Roberson had a lot of potential, and he arrived at Penn State as hopefully the next big thing. Unfortunately, he played very little while he was in Happy Valley and had that terrible game against Iowa in 2021, in which he pretty much did nothing right, and they lost on the road to the Hawkeyes. He then transferred to UConn for the 2022 season, but would end up getting hurt. In 2023, he'd play for UConn again, throwing for 2,000 yards and 12 touchdowns, before trying to transfer back to the Power 4 level as he went to Kansas State. Last season, he was the backup to Avery Johnson, and for his final year of eligibility, he has decided to go across the country and become the starter for Buffalo. I don't think he'll be a world breaker, but I don't think he'll be bad either. He kind of got screwed over a little bit in his college career, and it'll be cool to hopefully see him salvage his career. Up next, we need to talk about the newest member of the conference, UMass, and their new quarterback, Brandon Rose. Going back in time, he ended up going to Marietta Valley High School, which was located in California, and Rose was the number 34 quarterback in the class of 2022. He's a guy that I honestly did not pay much attention to, but he would see a little bit of action with the Utah Utes. In 2024, with all the injuries that ended up happening, Rose saw the field and he threw for 157 yards with 2 touchdowns and 2 picks. He'll now transfer across the country to UMass, who's replacing Tyson Pomachan, and I guess Rose is seen as one of the better quarterbacks in the MAC this year, but at the same time, I don't really know. For our next school, we need to talk about Bowling Green, who just lost Connor Bazelak, and they bring in Drew Pine. I literally did a video on Pine a couple of hours ago, so it's kind of cool, but coming out of Connecticut, he got offers while he was in 8th grade, and was seen as one of the best quarterbacks in Connecticut high school football history. The 4-star recruit ended up going to Notre Dame, where he was a solid starter back in 2022, but then eventually got replaced by Sam Hartman, and he went off to Arizona State. He lost the job there, then transferred to Mizzou in 2024, and had one good game against Oklahoma. He now will transfer to Bowling Green for his final year of eligibility, and he's one of the more well-traveled and more experienced quarterbacks on this list, but I don't know how high of a ceiling he really has at this point. For our next team, we need to talk about the Akron Zips, and their quarterback is going to be Ben Finley. Coming out of Paradise Valley High School in the state of Arizona, Finley was the number 29 quarterback in the class of 2020 and the 745th overall player. Finley was seen as a Power 4 type prospect, as during his career he had over 8,200 yards and 74 touchdowns, but he had an absurd high 46 interceptions. He was the brother of NFL quarterback Ryan Finley, and when Ben arrived to NC State, he just never really had much of a chance. He threw for 143 yards and a touchdown in his first 2 seasons, before actually getting a little bit of time in 2022, throwing for 741 yards with 3 touchdowns and 3 picks apiece. He would then transfer to Cal ahead of the 2023 season, and he was a backup, and he still struggled with interceptions, having 4 INTs compared to 3 TDs. This past season at Akron, he ended up having a good season as he threw for 2,600 yards and 16 touchdowns, and is now one of the more experienced quarterbacks in the MAC, and hopefully will help Akron get back on the map. Another guy I've done a full-length feature on the channel about is Daquan Finn. Coming out of Martin Luther King High School in Detroit, Michigan, Finn was the quarterback before Dante Moore was there, and he ended up being really solid. Finn threw for 2,000 yards and 24 touchdowns before he arrived at Toledo, and then he became one of the best quarterbacks in Rockets football history. He had nearly 9,000 yards and close to 100 touchdowns during his time with the Rockets, and his best season came in 2023. Trying to maximize his potential, he decided to leave Toledo and transfer to Baylor, but after just 1 game, he got hurt and fell behind on the depth chart to Sawyer Robertson. He had 3 touchdowns and 2 picks in Waco, and now transfers back to the MAC to Miami of Ohio, who's replacing Brett Gabbert. Daquan Finn is not new to the MAC, and he could be the best player on the list, to be honest, but we'll have to wait and see how he bounces back from last season. The consensus second best quarterback in the MAC this year is Toledo quarterback Tucker Gleason, as coming out of Plant High School, which is located in Tampa, Florida, Gleason was solid. He was the number 31 dual threat quarterback in the class of 2020 and was just outside of the top 1,000. Despite having a couple of Power 4 offers, Gleason would decide to go to Toledo. He had more than 3,000 yards and 33 touchdowns as a 2-year starter at Plant. and he literally has waited a long time at Toledo. He was stuck behind Daquan Finn for years, but in his first season as a starter, he threw for just under 3,000 yards and 24 touchdowns, and also had 7 more rushing scores. Toledo is one of the best teams in the MAC, and Gleason is leading the way. He honestly might have undrafted free agent NFL potential, but at minimum, he should help Toledo have a really good year and win more than 10 games. And finally, at number 1, the consensus best quarterback in the MAC is going to be Ohio quarterback Parker Navaro. Coming out of Desert High School in Phoenix, Arizona, Parker was sort of an underrated gem. He was the number 51 pro-style quarterback in the class of 2020 and was barely ranked inside the top 1,500, but Navaro was getting a decent amount of recruiting attention. UCF saw enough in him to give him an offer, and he decided to commit to the Knights. After completing one pass down in Orlando in 2021, Navaro transferred in 2022 and decided to back up Curtis Rourke. He was a backup for the next 2 years and had 3 total touchdowns, and then in 2024, he finally became the starter. He ended up throwing for 2,423 yards with 13 touchdowns and 11 interceptions, but on the ground, this guy was a beast. He rushed for over 1,000 yards and also had 18 touchdowns. Obviously, he can work a little bit on his interceptions, but I think Navaro is by far the most exciting quarterback in the MAC and probably has the best chance of being a household name. Either way, the MAC has a lot of exciting names, and for guys who follow quarterback recruiting as closely as I do, it's cool to see these Power 4 quarterbacks end up here and see them having a lot of success. The MAC is always very interesting, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video and the spotlight I just put on the MAC conference. But what do you guys think? Who's the best quarterback in the MAC this year? Who's the most underrated? And which conference should I do next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you're new to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.